Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington Realtors Legal Hotline lawyer. And I want to talk today about some advertising questions that I've received. They have to do with sending out the postcards, either just listed postcards or just sold postcards. Let's first talk about just listed postcards. The question that I've gotten about just listed postcards is from brokers who are not the listing broker, asking if they can send out a just listed postcard featuring a picture of the property. They might even take that picture themselves and advertising their own services. They're not advertising, so the question goes, I'm not advertising the property, I'm advertising my services. Potential buyer, if you'd like to see this house, call me and I will show it to you. And the question is that okay for brokers other than the listing broker to do? And the answer is only if you have listing broker's permission. Listing brokers or seller's permission. Because while the question is framed under a banner of I'm advertising, promoting myself, you are in fact advertising seller's property. When you send out a postcard with seller's property, with seller's house on it and their address, and you say just listed, you are advertising seller's property, and you may not advertise seller's property for sale without seller's permission, or if seller has given that permission to listing broker, you can get that permission from listing broker or listing firm. If you don't have that permission, don't send out that just listed card. Next question is, can I send out a just sold card? The first category of question comes from the broker who was the listing broker in that transaction. The transaction has now closed, and so the listing broker says, hey, I'd like to send out a postcard that says just closed and advertise the fact that I was successful at not only listing but selling this property. Can I do that even though the person who now owns the property is not somebody I represented? And the answer is yes. If the broker was involved in the transaction as the listing broker, has their own picture that they took of the seller's property at the time that the seller owned the property, they took the property with seller's permission, then listing broker can put that picture on a card with the address of the property and send out a postcard that says just sold. The other category of this question comes from a broker, or comes from brokers who were neither the listing nor the selling broker in that transaction, but would like to advertise just closed or pending even of a property. If you would like to buy a property in this neighborhood, contact me. I can help you achieve the same results as this buyer. Can that broker who was not involved in the transaction take a picture of the house, send out that card? And the answer is no. Washington law prohibits false, misleading, and deceptive advertising. And an advertisement like that seems to indicate very clearly that the broker promoting the just sold transaction was a broker involved in the transaction. Now, broker may, through the words on the card, try to distance themselves from being an actual participant in the transaction, and maybe broker can work with their own legal counsel and come up with language that sufficiently answers or addresses the issue as to whether or not broker was involved in that transaction. But brokers, if this is the card that you're trying to send out on a transaction where you were not the listing or selling broker, then make sure you are working with legal counsel to verify that you are in compliance with Washington law, that you are not engaged in false, misleading, or deceptive advertising. Because if you don't carefully structure your language on that card, the Department of Licensing, upon receipt of a complaint, and I can almost promise you the Department of Licensing is going to get a complaint on this one, because the brokers who were involved in that transaction are probably going to file the complaint. So when the department gets that complaint and asks you to show how your advertisement was not false, misleading, or deceptive, leading the potential buyers to believe that you were involved in the transaction, you better be able to account for that. My advice, don't advertise in that way. You're probably asking for trouble. If you have questions on these advertising efforts or any other, send an email to me, legalhotline@warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington Realtors member.